Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, February 1st, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feast and Marian meditations. So today, the first day of February, we have a number of different celebrations. So the first one takes us to Kaiko, Nicosia in Cyprus, where they celebrate the Panagia Paramythia. That's my attempt at, Greek. So, on February 1st, 1997, a novice monk noticed that the Virgin and Child were both weeping on the icon of Panagia Paramythia, the All-Holy Consoler, in the Kaiko Monastery in Cyprus. Indeed, off and on for a month, many witnesses, both monks and pilgrims, saw pine-scented tears flow down their holy faces. Right? So this icon is a copy from the 1500s of one in the Vatopedi Monastery on Mount Athos. I guess they celebrate that feast on February 3rd, right? So this is a very interesting story. And the story itself, too, is of the original icon is also quite interesting, right? Because tradition tells us that first it was made in order to thank our Blessed Mother for her intercession. She saved the son of the Emperor Theodosius, who had fallen off a ship and into the sea. But through Mary's intercession, he was carried to shore unharmed and found sleeping in a bush, right? And so that event gives the name actually to the monastery, Vatopedi, which I guess comes from Patos Paidon, which means the bush of the child. So what's also interesting about this is tradition says, furthermore, that on the original image, the positions and the figures and the positions of Christ and the Blessed Virgin changed following a strange miracle on January 21st in the year 807. So we're talking a long time ago. Pirates had secretly landed on the shore of the monastery, and they were waiting until morning when the gates would open, and then they could launch a surprise attack on the monastery. Now, the abbot, who was praying in the monastery after matins, he heard the words from the icon say, "Do not open the gates of the monastery today, but go up on the walls and drive away the pirates." And as he turned to look, he saw Our Lady turned to look over her right shoulder, and looking at him, while the Holy Child was stretching out his hand to cover the mouth of his mother, saying, "No, mother, do not watch over this sinful flock. Let them fall under the sword of the pirates and be punished as they deserve." However, the Blessed Virgin, taking her son's hand in hers and turning her head a little to free her mouth, repeated the same words. Right? And so this is the arrangement of the figures. Right? It's remained this way permanently. And the monks, miraculously saved from the pirates, gave thanks to the Theotokos. Right? And they call the image the Paramythia, which means the calming down or restraint, right? So that's a very beautiful story. Also today, we jump up to Delft in southern Holland in Netherlands, where we celebrate Maria ter Nood Gods, Our Lady of God's Passion. And we recall an apparition that took place in 1351. So what's the story here? Well, 1351, there lived in Delft a pious brother who would beg, going house to house to get food. His name was Simon, the mendicant monk. He spent a lot of time in prayer. Now, on the feast of Candlemas, February 2nd, in 1351, the residents saw Brother Simon kneeling in front of one of the houses on the north side of the market field, right, where now there's terraces and souvenir shops. So he sat there motionless with his hands and face raised, staring at a fixed point in the sky, above where the new church now stands. At that time, there was only a small wooden chapel. Right? Passerbys and local residents stood there in amazement and curiosity, but nobody said anything to him. They couldn't see anything themselves. Now, not far from there lived Andries del Pelsmaker, and he made it a habit to have Brother Simon deliver some food every day, by his servant, Jan Kool. So that very day, as Brother Simon was caught up in his vision, Jan Kool was making his way to give this delivery of food to the brother. When he reached the town, Jan Kool saw Simon in this state and touched him and said, "Hey, what's going on?" Simon pulled John towards him and pointed up to the sky. And at that point, Jan Kool also saw the vision that Simon was having. It was a golden church in the sky, and in its gate, Mary. Shortly thereafter, Brother Simon passed away, but for Jan Kool, the apparitions continued until exactly 1 year after they started. So the city council concluded that this was a message from Mary. She wanted a beautiful church on the site where that simple chapel was, and so it had to happen, right? And so, although the new church wasn't completely finished at that time, It's huge, right? And it could have accommodated, in fact, the entire population of Delft more than 4 times over. Plans were made for this new church. Construction was started in 1381. Tower work began in 1394. And exactly 100 years later, the church was finished. Now, we also celebrate today the baptism of Saint Louis de Montfort, right? So Louis de Montfort was born January 31st, 1673. We know he was a Catholic priest, but he's most famous for his devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary and his total consecration, right? That baptism is recalled as part of the vow of consecration. You say, I renew in all sincerity the promises I solemnly made at the time of my holy baptism, right? And we just remember that holy men and women see the world differently than others. In his consecration to Mary, St. Louis Marie writes, "You are truly blessed if the world persecutes you, opposing your plans though they are good, thinking evil of your intentions, calumniating your conduct, and taking away unjustly your reputation or your possessions. My son, be aware of complaining to others, rather than to me," to Jesus, right, "of the bad treatment you receive, and do not seek ways of justifying yourself, particularly when you are the only one to suffer from it." So again, the baptism of St. Louis de Montfort, we're reminded we should celebrate too our baptism. And so that's what we're celebrating today, the first day of February. For today's reading from The Imitation of Mary by Alexander de Rouville, we continue with Book 2, which concerns the virtues and life of Mary from Jesus' birth to his death. And today we'll read Chapter 13, Fervor in God's Service. And again, here we have a conversation between the believer and the Blessed Virgin Mary. So we start with the believer. Holy Virgin, in every situation of your life that has been made known to us, you gave us splendid examples of fervent piety. It was that fervent devotion that yearly brought you to Jerusalem at Passover time. Although the obligation of going up to celebrate this great feast lay only on your husband Joseph, you never failed to accompany him. Your love for God was too great to permit your doing for him only what was strictly duty. How ungrateful I am, and how differently I have acted towards the Lord up to now. Despite all his benefits to me, I have always shown myself hesitant to him, and if he wanted my obedience and homage, he had to command me as my Lord. Mary, my child, a heart that loves God neglects nothing it can do to please him. You have little realization of how much the Lord deserves your service if you are unwilling to put yourself out for him. Consider how much those who declare themselves followers of the world are willing to do for their master, and learn from them how you should be willing to do for what you should be willing to do for the Lord. See how concerned they are. They spare themselves neither suffering nor weariness in serving the world, and only to please it, condemn themselves to 1,000 forms of subjection. Yet you find it too heavy a burden to please God, and give this sovereign master proofs of your love. To ask you to be attentive to his will is to ask you a submission that is too great. Do you not find it humiliating that I am forced to call your attention to the example of worldlings and to send you to school with them in order to learn how to serve God? Let not the children of this world outstrip you in generosity, and let the world not boast that it is better served by its followers than the God of Christians is by those who claim to belong to him. Stop being one of those Christians who think themselves very devout if they do exactly what the law prescribes under threat of punishment. These people give the impression that they would be easily content to losing God's grace if they could do it without risk of punishment. They fear God rather than love him. My child, you should indeed fear this God, whose punishments are terrible, but you should fear more than anything else that you may not love enough this God who is so good and lovable. Would a friend think you a very fervent friend of his if you were willing to do only what friendship absolutely required? Love is generous and will not be limited to what it is obliged to do. If you love greatly, you use every opportunity to please the one you love. If your love for God is fervent, then whatever you do for him will be less than what you want to do. Love ardently, and your love will alleviate your weariness. To a fervent soul, God gives such a desire that it finds heavenly delight even in what costs it the most effort. And then we have the response of the believer. Dear loving Mother, win for me from your Son the fervor of which you speak, and of which you have given me such glowing examples. I admit it with shame. Every difficulty stops me. I yield to the first temptation of boredom and disgust, and human respect often prevents me from carrying out the inspirations of grace. You see how much I need encouragement. May your salutary instructions kindle in my heart the fervent love the God of love deserves to find in his servant.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our Marian podcast. As St. John Paul II teaches us, from Mary we learn to love Christ, her Son, the Son of God. Through her intercession, may we grow ever closer to him. We encourage you to share this with a loved one or friend and help spread our devotion to Mary. Thank you, and God bless.